Welcome to Stay Lucid and Brand the Future, a series of conversations with those shaping the present of agriculture and already working on its future. Today, we are joined by Valentin Pitiot, head of Agribusiness at Kelp Blue, a pioneering company cultivating giant kelp to regenerate oceans and produce sustainable agricultural biostimulants. His career places him at the intersection of marine regeneration, agriculture, and sustainability, exploring how biological solutions can transform not only farm productivity, but also the future of the planet. So thank you for being with us, Valentin.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Your work connects two seemingly different worlds, deep ocean kelp cultivation and terrestrial agriculture. Could you start by explaining this powerful ocean to soil philosophy and why you believe the future of farming is intrinsically linked to the health of our oceans?
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the question. Yeah, so I think to start with, usually we tend to look at the marine ecosystem and then the terrestrial ecosystem. But we don't really look at them together, right?
As one thing.
Exactly. So what is happening is that when we use a lot of fertilizers to ensure we can keep up with the need of, growing populations and so on, we have a lot of runoff. So this is basically chemicals like nutrients that will run off and end up in the ocean. But this, we just focus on the farm. So we don't really quantify all those things and look at the impact. Mm-hmm. So what is happening is that then you have those runoff of chemicals going to the sea and creating acidification, eutrophication, and basically having a really
distorting the
ecosystem. So what we're trying to do, and this is the philosophy, is to look at both ecosystem at the same time and to use the blue, so the seaweed, to help decrease those fertilizers. That's an example, to reduce runoff. And this basically is kind of closing the loop. And we do this through seaweed cultivation.
Very clear. You have a background in international development and even studied the global seaweed market for the World Bank. What was the moment you realized that cultivated kelp wasn't just a marine product, but a powerful tool for transforming global agriculture? It was an epiphany at some point.
Exactly. So actually, I realized this what I was searching about, of course, like different kind of seaweed companies, but also about the history of seaweed. And what is quite interesting here is that seaweed has been used since centuries for agriculture. So people were using them from the beach and putting them on the crops.
In the field.
Exactly, to kind of bring nutrients. They already understood this a while ago. And if we look at this, lots of things have changed in terms of processing, in terms of cultivation, but it has always been here. So it's coming back to the history that is quite interesting. And there is a book that I could recommend from Vincent Dumézel, which is called The Seaweed Revolution, kind of looking at what was the history of seaweed.
We will read it. Let's now focus on the present market and on the practical challenges and opportunities you face today in bringing this innovation to farmers. You have the motto, by farmers, for farmers. When you talk to a conventional farmer today, what is the most compelling argument for them to adopt a kelp-based biostimulant like Steam Blue Plus?
Sure. So I really look at farmers as entrepreneurs. And they have a really difficult work because they have to work with nature like we do, basically. We also farm, so like farmers, and we have to work with rough ocean conditions like they work with rough climate conditions. And like every entrepreneur, what is super important is your impact, of course, but also the profits and the return on investment that you can make. So what is super, I think, compelling for farmers, and especially conventional farmers, but also organic farmers, is to ensure that the solution you can bring to them will give them a return. And we quantify this, for example, with field trials with accredited agencies, and we ensure that when they use a product, they can generate profits and probably also save a bit of time to spend more time with the family, which is also super important. So yeah, I'd say about it.
That's the most compelling argument. Regenerative agriculture is a term we hear everywhere. From your perspective, what tangible role do seed with biostimulants play in making regenerative practices not just an ideal, but a profitable and scalable reality for large-scale farmers?
Sure, it's a really interesting question. If we look at regenerative agriculture, it's for sure something that that is the future, because we also need a better way to produce, to restore the soil, and also reconnect. I would say a bit with the soil. And seaweed biostimulant can play a huge role here to decrease fertilizers. So the impact is huge, because you can, like I was saying, decrease the runoff, but also in the meantime, you can restore soil health. So a better texture of the soil to retain more water for drought stress and so on. While just bringing more nutrients and increasing the availability of those nutrients. So I believe in seaweed biostimulants to sort of regenerate the soil, to build more resilience for the crop that farmers will grow in the future.
Unlike many competitors who harvest wild seaweed, Kelp Blue cultivates giant kelp, which is a strong difference. How does this control over the entire production process from ocean to bottle translate into a better, more consistent product for the farmer?
Yeah, it's actually by owning the full value chain. So we have a hatchery where we select the seaweed, then we plant them, then we harvest them, process them, and distribute the product ourselves through our partners. It's by owning the full value chain that we have the full traceability of it. And by cultivating, we can understand when we make a product, for example, when the date of harvesting, which part of the farm we harvested, and so on. So this helps us to have through this traceability a really good quality. And by cultivating seaweed, we have those massive farms in the oceans, perennial, so we only harvest the top. So basically see it as the seaweed growing, reaching the surface, and then growing horizontally. We only trim the top, so harvest what's floating, to keep the biomass for biodiversity and carbon sequestration also. And by only cutting the top, we can ensure that we always harvest basically the same place with the same conditions and so on. So it means less chance to have variation, which is usually happening if you wild harvest. If you wild harvest, you would go on the beach, sometimes get your seaweed from there. So you have more heavy metals because it's closer to shore. The quality can also be less interesting.
It's probably dead.
Exactly. So, or then you go to the sea and you cut it. A bit like, we can do with woods in forest. And here you also don't really know like if it's going to be the same quality the year after. So we have full control of this, and also full control of the supply, because we harvest every day. A bit like you have, like a grass, and then you would just basically cut your grass every 4 months. We do it every day, basically. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Looking further ahead, let's explore the scaling of your model. Your model has a dual climate benefit, sequestering carbon in the ocean and reducing chemical inputs on land. As you scale up, which of these two impacts do you believe will have the more profound effect on our planet's health? It's probably a balance, no?
Exactly. I think this is, coming back to your first question, when I mentioned that you look at the whole and you try to restore the balance of both ecosystem. So I'm an agronomist. I would tend to say like the impact on farming, but the impact on the ocean is also massive. So it's indeed balancing those two to be able to restore this kind of ecosystems.
In the next decade, do you see biostimulants as a complementary tool to be used alongside fertilizers and chemicals, or as a direct replacement that will fundamentally reduce the agricultural industry reliance on synthetic inputs?
I think biostimulants is a kind of a new tool in the toolbox for farmers. For now, on the trials we do, and also on the other biostimulants, I didn't see results where you can fully replace fertilizer, but you can reduce a lot. And for now, this is already massive. We can come back to, if you want, to the emissions on farms, but you can reduce it by 20%. Okay. And reducing fertilizer not only means just reducing fertilizer and the footprint, it means for farmers also being, let's say, more resilient in their business, because fertilizer prices sometimes is skyrocketing with what the geopolitical impact, and if they can reduce the dependency on it with something like seaweed biostimulant where the price is very constant, they can also ensure that they have a different or like, let's say, more power to take care of their business.
You are already operating in places like Namibia. As you look to expand, what are the key characteristics you look for in a new region, both from an ocean cultivation perspective and an agricultural market perspective? So when we expand, and we're planning to expand, so we are currently in Namibia, which is a great place to cultivate seaweed. We will expand in New Zealand, in the future in Chile, potentially also in Alaska. We always look at a range of different parameters. So we look at of course, the seaweed that we are focusing on, Macrocystis pyrifera, also called giant kelp. It's called, by the way, giant kelp because it grows extremely fast. It can grow up exactly in like
ideal conditions
or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. So it grows really, really quickly, and it can reach up to like 30 meters, and this is also why people call it giant kelp or kelp cathedral. So when we look at implementing a new farm, we look at the water temperature, some key characteristic, also the depth. We need to ensure that we can put the structure down, that there is potential for carbon sequestration and so on. Okay. But we also look at the impact that we could have and at the coastal communities. So for us, it's super important where we go to a place that we can hire locally, to boost, of course, the employment, etc. So we also look at what are the big universities we could partner with, and so on, and also the political situation. Exactly, because you still need to get a license to be able to cultivate your farm. So you really need to work with local communities to get this, which is fascinating, I think. And then more on the farming side, we do not necessarily, I would say, select the place for the farming side, but we do ensure that whenever we produce, that the first people that can get access to the biostimulants are the locals, because we really want to give back to local communities.
How do local communities receive this? Because I think it is probably a surprise. No? Okay, I want to cultivate in the sea.
Exactly, especially in some let's say regions or countries, they're quite used to work with the sea. In some other region, is something very new. So it's some are feeling like a little bit like what is it? But then they see employment. They see that we involve communities. We actually created a blue school in Namibia. So it's a school to basically teach young students and the future generation about ocean awareness, robotics, and so on. It's really inspiring, and basically it's all about involving the people around you to make it work. Ourselves, we cannot make it work, so we really need the people around to
really interesting. For this final section, I would like you to share your boldest vision. Let's imagine the ultimate potential of this model and what the world could look like in 2050. By 2050, Kelp Blue aims to sequester gigatons of CO2. Paint a picture for us of this future. Do you envision a global network of underwater kelp or other seaweed forests, creating massive marine ecosystems while simultaneously powering a fully regenerative agricultural system on land?
Yes, I believe this is where we want to. Go. So to try to be a little bit more practical, today we have a license for 3,000 hectares, a little bit more in Namibia. So we'd love to cover this surface in the future. And what is super fascinating about it is a bit like if you would be in the desert, because it's in the ocean, kind of a desert, and you will start planting trees. and then you will have like little bugs coming to eat the trees, and then some bigger ones to eat the bugs, and then some animals. It's exactly the same in our ecosystem, so in the farms. So we have microcystis, and then suddenly we have some larvae coming, we call it kelp lysis, for example, and then we have fish coming to eat it, and we recreate the food ecosystem with different types of seaweed, with different types of biodiversity, which is really beautiful to see. So what I do envision for the future, and this is the vision of Daniel, he's our CEO, is to basically have enough kelp forest to capture as much as the world emits, but this will take time, of course.
Of course, yeah.
And if you plant the size of Australia, microcystis, potentially you could sequester as much carbon as the entire world is emitting. So this is the really long-term vision, but we have to go, of course, step by step.
A very ambitious goal. How will this shift towards biostimulants and regenerative practices change the food on our plates in the future?
Yeah. So today we really need to produce more, right? But we usually compromise quality of the food. So we have bread that is coming with way less nutrients. The protein content of the wheat is decreasing, and we have this growing population. So we just want to produce more. I think regenerative agriculture is kind of a key philosophy, and probably even more than this, to be able to answer food security by not only keeping, let's say, the production, but increasing the value of the production by increasing the nutrients, the nutritional content, antioxidants, etc. So you can basically improve your food quality while keeping the production high, and in the meantime restore the soil, because at this pace we're losing lots of land, and in the future, if we want to be able to feed everyone, we're already struggling. We really need to change farming practices and respect the soils.
What is the single most important policy change at a global or regional level that needs to happen to unlock the full potential of this blue-green economy and make it the standard?
Yeah.
Or maybe not the standard, a value.
Yeah. I would say for this specific question, I will look at the two separately.
Okay.
So look at the ocean and look at the green, so the land. I think on the land side, when you create products with seaweed, like seaweed biostimulants, but for example, we're going to make in the future seaweed leather and potentially also other type of products, there is a lack of regulation and a lack of harmonization of those regulations. So for example, in Europe, since only a few years, we have a new regulation, biostimulant regulation, but it's not the case in Latin America or in lots of other countries. And you need to go country by country to register the product. It's a long process, it's very costly. So a lot of companies, they struggle to basically, generate a revenue and this is really, really a big challenge. So I think on the land side, it would be to harmonize all those regulations to ease the access of this innovation. And more on the ocean side, we're talking about wild harvest and so on. I think it is very important to have policies in place that can ensure that we're taking care of the oceans. You know what happened on the land with deforestation, for example, in many different countries. We really want this not to happen also in the ocean and protect the natural habitat. So some people are wild harvesting seaweed in a sustainable way, and some other companies are impacting the ocean like this. So it's very important to have regulations to ensure we can protect this, or to cultivate seaweed.
To wrap up, let's focus on the immediate actions and the core purpose driving this entire mission. What is the most critical action that the agricultural industry must take today to embrace a truly regenerative future? About
farming, we talk a lot about this with huge companies. So we work, for example, with food companies and so on, with distributor. But for me to truly embrace it, we need to put the farmers at the center of the discussions, because they are the one who will produce for us, who will feed us, who will face many challenges to ensure they can help us getting the food on our plates. And it's not only to put the farmer at the center of the discussions, but also to reconnect with the final consumer, so us basically, because nowadays when we eat food, we actually have no idea how it was, you know, grown, cultivated, what's the, you know, like what's the technical way of doing it. And I think it's very important to reconnect with this.
And it's basically because the farmer is also it's like in the middle of a crisis, no? Because
exactly.
It's a change in a role that it has changed a lot too fast
recently.
And
exactly.
They're trying to adapt to this change.
To keep up, yeah. So it's to reconnect and ensure we can do it in a more reasonable way.
And just as a final thing, please complete this sentence. The future of agriculture is?
I would say then to reconnect farmers with the final consumers to ensure that together we can advocate for sustainable and regenerative farming.
Perfect. Thank you, Valentin.
Thanks a lot for having me.